Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our monthly webinar, which we are thrilled to be co-sponsoring this month with Vera Institute for Justice. I am really excited for today's discussion on diversion in action, a case study from Vermont. And for those who don't know, my name is Rachel Marshall. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution here at John Jay College. The IIP provides a national platform to bring together prosecutors, policy experts, and the communities they serve to promote data-driven strategies, cutting-edge scholarship, and innovative thinking. The IIP champions criminal justice reform policies that advance community-centered standards of safety, fairness, and dignity. And we are delighted to be co-hosting today's event along with Vera, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. We have a number of great panelists today, and in the interest of time, I'm going to very briefly introduce them. We'll put their full bios in the chat. But first, I'm honored to introduce State's Attorney Sarah George, who's the Chittenden County State's Attorney in Burlington, Vermont. Sarah is the second woman in Vermont history to serve in this role, and she's been a prosecutor in Chittenden County since January 2011 and sworn in as the elected State's Attorney in 2017. Since being elected Chittenden County State's Attorney, she has focused her efforts on overhauling the criminal legal system. She uses her prosecutorial discretion to implement evidence-based practices and policies that work to keep her community safe. Sarah is dedicated to providing opportunity, intervention, and holistic support to survivors, families, and those who commit crimes, holding individuals accountable, and implementing smart on crime policies that promote safe, healthy, and strong communities. Welcome, State's Attorney George. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Megan Nyack, who's the Associate Director of Programming with Vera's Reshaping Prosecution Initiative, which works with prosecutors across the country to end mass incarceration, address racial disparities, and make their offices more accountable. She serves as a staff lead for the Motion for Justice Project, which provides technical assistance to prosecutors and community partners seeking to center racial equity in prosecutors' work. And as I mentioned, Vera is co-sponsoring today's event. So thank you, Megan. Next, I'm honored to introduce Tom Dalton, who's the Executive Director of Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform. Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform is an educational and advocacy nonprofit aimed at developing a more coordinated criminal justice system that values the humanity of all people, restores relationships, and uses incarceration as a last resort for public safety. And finally, welcome to Jess Kirby. She's the Director of Client Services at Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform, where she works in direct services with justice-involved people, especially those suffering from substance use disorders. She works to raise awareness of criminal justice issues in Vermont, especially the impact of mass incarceration and better alternatives for reducing crimes. She speaks to groups across the state, organizes educational events, and uses social and traditional media to get the word out. Jess also works with policymakers and community leaders to change policies and statutes. So welcome to all of our panelists. We are so delighted to have you with us. And we're going to dive right into our conversation because we have a lot to cover as we look into this specific case study that we'll be talking about today. But I want to encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat. We will get to Q&A at the end of today's program, and we're excited to talk about ways that this program and the ideas that we talk about can be applied across the country. So I'm going to start with you, State's Attorney George. To start off, let's make sure that we are kind of setting the foundation about what diversion even means when we use that phrase. State's Attorney George, can you describe what diversion programs are generally and what benefits they offer?
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. Thanks for putting this together, and thank you for everybody who is attending. As a prosecutor, from my perspective, diversion programs are anything that divert criminal cases from the system. So they now, as diversion programs are growing, they come at different points in time, but typically they would be, in a best case scenario, before somebody is charged officially with a criminal offense, that they are diverted out of the criminal legal system and into some other program that will address the basic needs and the underlying needs that led them to commit the crime. They historically have been sort of for people with no criminal record or for people with really low level offenses. They luckily are growing to be more of anything that diverts somebody from the system at any point in time throughout the process of the case.
Thank you. There's a lot of information around diversion. A lot of it is misinformation, I would say. And so what are some of the myths and maybe misunderstandings about diversion programs that you've encountered, and how do you respond to those?
Yeah, I actually think that it is disinformation. I think it's intentional, and it's really harmful. But the myths and disinformation that we see in our community is that diversion is, not even a slap on the wrist, if a slap on the wrist, and that people are sort of getting away with criminal behavior, and that there's no accountability, and that people can just do whatever they want. And we have all kinds of programs that just divert them from the system. The opposite is actually true. There's, of course, a ton of research now showing that diversion programs, and frankly, not charging people at all in some instances, is actually far better for communities. That coming into the legal system actually makes people more likely to commit further offenses down the road. So again, the research shows that diversion programs are incredibly helpful for communities and for the people that have committed the crime, because they address that person's needs outside of a system that has been shown to be harmful.
Thank you. And we'll dive into a lot of that over the course of our discussion,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But before that, Megan, I want to turn to you for a minute. And we both work in prosecutorial reform. Why is it important from your perspective to focus on diversion as a critical aspect of prosecutorial reform?
Yeah, so I think speaking to some of what Sarah mentioned, but also just the kind of knowledge that we have now of just the devastating collateral consequences that people face when they come into contact with the legal system. Diversion programs give us an opportunity to give people an off-ramp from that system, avoid those collateral consequences, but still, as Sarah mentioned, be held accountable for whatever the incident is that brought them in contact with the legal system. I also think something to center is that we know that communities of color in our country are over-policed, over-surveilled, over-incarcerated, et cetera, et cetera. And diversion programs, particularly if they are designed correctly, have an opportunity to allow prosecutors to begin to address those racial disparities in their jurisdictions. All of the programs that we work with don't exclude people based on a prior criminal history. We know that people of color are more likely to have a criminal history because of the over-policing and surveillance and incarceration. And so a diversion program that doesn't block people from entering it when those are the circumstances allows a prosecutor to begin to hopefully see some reductions in those racial disparities.
Great. And you mentioned some of the programs that you work with and that you don't have specific requirements around prior convictions. I'm wondering if you can talk about some examples of different kinds of diversion programs. I know State's Attorney George mentioned that there's a huge range now and that really diversion can be for anything. But what are some examples of common diversion programs that you've seen prosecutors implement, and how are they responsive to the needs of those specific communities?
Sure. So obviously State's Attorney George's program is a substance use disorder program. There are many of those around the country. I think they come in very different shapes or sizes. Sarah's is very bold and different and building great evidence for why this modality works. We work with other programs that are doing restorative justice work. And so in Charlottesville, Virginia, there's a wonderful restorative justice program where we're seeing the prosecutors there, Joe Platania and Jim Hingley, send higher level cases, vehicular homicides and hit and run cases are going to restorative justice. And we're seeing that the people who are harmed there or their family members are having better experiences with the criminal legal system through that process than they would through traditional prosecution. There's also programs that are trying to address mental health issues earlier on and provide people with mental health services instead of incarcerating them when mental health issues or mental health crises arise. And we have a program in Marion County, Indianapolis, that particularly the entry point and the eligibility is that you're unhoused. And so there may be a variety of charges that exist, but that you could enter the system with, but the programming is around you being unhoused.
I have a lot to say, and there's a truck outside my window, so I apologize if you all hear it. But I was going to add too, there's some that deal with specific age groups. I've seen a lot of those. There's also some statutory diversion programs that make diversion mandatory for certain kinds of populations and individuals. So we'll get into a lot of that over the course of this conversation. Before we kind of dive into the specific program we're studying today and all of its successes, I want to get a little bit of background on Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform. So let me start with you, Tom. Your office collaborated with State's Attorney George's office and Vera's Motion for Justice campaign to create the Incentives for Success program that we'll be talking about in depth today. Before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform and some of the services and work that you do?
Sure. So we were founded in 2013 by a former legislator, and I've been the executive director since 2017. And I would describe our approach as a change-focused organization. And the main mechanisms of change that we're using are policy advocacy and direct services. And we found that there's a really important synergy between working directly with people who are impacted by the justice system and then trying to make change in the big picture through policy advocacy at the legislature and other ways. And so an example of that would be VCJR was the lead organization in advocating for legislation that would provide comprehensive access to MOUD treatment medications in Vermont correctional facilities. And that really grew out of what we were seeing with the people who are incarcerated and the problems that they were having because they were, in treatment in the community and then became incarcerated and were forced off the medication that was working for them. And in some cases, it had really tragic results because they were released and overdosed, within a few days and died. And so it was an example of where, working directly with people, you can see what needs to happen. And then having a policy mission allows you to also focus on those bigger pictures. And so when that legislation passed, and it was very comprehensive and really good legislation, but the Vermont Department of Corrections sought, or their medical contractor kind of was part of it, sought to kind of minimally implement that law. We had direct access to the people that were impacted by those decisions, and we contacted the Department of Corrections about over 75 individual cases of people who were not getting the medications they were supposed to be getting under the new law, and eventually got the law fully implemented. So that's a little example of how we see that combination. Another one that I won't go into too much depth with, but it's pretty interesting study, and it was a partnership with Sarah George, is we worked on legislation removing criminal penalties for possession of buprenorphine without a prescription, because we were seeing in the community that people were using non-prescribed buprenorphine, and it was really helping them with their recovery, and it was creating a door to formal treatment, and yet people were being charged with possession of a life-saving medication. And we partnered with Sarah. Sarah used her prosecutorial discretion to say that she was no longer going to prosecute those crimes in Chittenden County, and that gave us a real-life case study to bring to the legislature and make that change happen. And so in terms of services, we operate a specialized reentry and recovery center for justice-involved people with substance use disorders. And some of the key services that we offer there include our contingency management program that we're talking about here. It's part of our diversion program. And recently we started a specialized health clinic with VCJR providing specialized medical case management, because we've been seeing so many people with serious wounds and infections related to the drug supply at this point. I think we'll probably hear more about that as we go forward.
Thank you so much, Tom. And Jess, I want to turn to you, especially following up on what Tom just said around some of the drug supply. You serve, as I mentioned, as the Director of Client Services at Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform and do direct services assisting those who are facing substance use disorders. And can you briefly summarize how common substance use disorder is in Chittenden County and sort of the impact of this problem specifically in your community?
Sure. Yeah, so Chittenden County in Burlington, where we're located and where Sarah George's office is really struggling with a substance use crisis, like many places across the country. Over the past couple of years, things have really kind of taken a turn for the worse, I guess you could say. We had one of the largest increases in overdose deaths per capita last year in the country. We have, like I heard, like the second highest rate of homelessness per capita. We have a 1% vacancy rate. We have pretty for housing, we have a pretty serious housing crisis and substance use crisis. There's a lot of uh public drug use right now. There's so many people that are unhoused. We had a state hotel program during COVID, and it kind of abruptly ended, and it sort of spilled hundreds of people onto the streets, and primarily into Chittenden County and in Burlington. Uh, you know, so there's a lot of public drug use, public intoxication. We've had a huge increase over the past few years in the number of people using methamphetamine. So there's often periods of acute psychosis, meth intoxication and acute psychosis and mental health crisis related to substance use in the community. There's a lot of calls to emergency responders every day. The drug supply is very contaminated and dangerous. Some people might have heard of xylazine, which is something that's popping up now, and primarily the opioid supply, the fentanyl supply, but also in other substances as well. And that, as Tom mentioned, is leading to a lot of other concerns for people. People have very serious wounds. Xylazine, a side effect of having xylazine in your body is that it makes you really susceptible to getting serious wounds because it's not actually meant for humans. It's an animal tranquilizer, and it's ended up very primarily in the supply. A lot of the supply in Vermont comes from Philadelphia, and they've done some research and studies there and found that xylazine's in like over 90% of the heroin fentanyl supply, and that's where we get a lot of our drug supply comes in from. And so people are walking around with really serious and untreated wounds that are leading to systemic infections and endocarditis, which is a very serious and life-threatening heart infection. And so our community is really struggling with a really serious substance use crisis, and people are really looking for solutions. And which is why we as a small organization try to be responsive to what's going on for the people that we serve, and trying to do things quickly. A lot of change takes like 5 and 10 years to respond to like changes with the drug supply and things like that. And so that's where we've started the medical partnership and trying to really be responsive to the needs of people with substance use disorder and justice involvement. So
Thanks, Jess, for painting that picture. And of course, it's a picture that sadly, I'm sure, is familiar to a lot of people watching, because a lot of the themes that you mentioned, the overlapping with housing challenges and the lack of housing supply, all of those are recurring themes we often see in communities that are impacted. I want to turn to the program that we're here to discuss today, the case study that we're exploring, which is the Incentives for Success program. And State's Attorney George, I'm going to turn to you to sort of set it up for us. And let's talk a little bit about what is the Incentives for Success program, and why did you feel it was important to bring to your county, especially in light of some of the concerns that Jess just outlined for us?
So the Incentives for Success program is a diversion program. It is pre-conviction, but primarily post-charge. So somebody has been charged with a criminal offense, and we divert their cases into the Incentives for Success program. I sort of pass them off, a very warm handoff, to Jess and Tom and their team. And those individuals engage in the program with Tom and Jess. And it's a 12-week program, or we should say 12 sessions program, because sometimes, as we know, it is low barrier. And so somebody might miss a week, and we are understandable of that. And so it could be more than 12 weeks, but they do have to meet with them 12 times. If they do come and they show up, they engage in a really large variety of things that I'll let Jess and Tom talk to you about, I think, a little bit later. But it does include looking for housing and residential treatment, or engaging in some conversations around criminal behavior and how that impacts the community. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they are required to do. And it is not a sobriety. They don't have to stop using, but they do have to come up with some goal about their use, either to use a particular substance less, or to engage in treatment, or to become sober, wherever they're at in that particular place. But they can't commit new crimes. So, and if they show up, they get paid. So there is an actual monetary incentive to come. So that is the sort of gist of it. If they show up for all of those 12 and they don't commit new crimes, then they sort of graduate from the program, and all of their pending charges are dismissed. We are specifically targeting people that have a lot of pending charges. So it's not somebody that just has one or two low-level sort of misdemeanor offenses, because those, we already have diversion programs for those folks, and they're eligible for those programs. This is really for people that are really high needs, who are facing incarceration, who have a lot of property crimes and other offenses that are fueled by their substance use disorder. And they aren't the type of people that our laws allow for, nor should they allow for pretrial detention, but they are facing incarceration at sentencing because of the number of cases they have. So though that was really the reason we sort of decided to partner on this, is because that is a group of people in our system, at least right now, that we are severely lacking adequate services for. And we have people with really low level needs, and we have diversion programs for that. And then we have people with really, really high level needs that we're at least trying treatment court, which has its own, its own struggles, and we're trying to deal with all of those as well. This is really for the people in between that they're really getting lost in our system, because especially since our COVID backlog, these are not cases that are being prioritized for trial. So people are unfortunately able to just continue picking up more offenses, and they're not having their needs met at all. So those are the people we really wanted to focus on. And our hope is to get about 50 people through the program, which might sound like a small number, but to give you some idea, right now we have, we've referred 11 people so far. And of those 11 people, I think it was around 140 cases, 140 charges. So this is, I think most communities have this, that we have a very small number of people committing a large number of our property crimes in our community. So our point was to really address the property crime happening in our community by giving those small number of people intense and really personalized services, and incentivizing them from coming by actually paying them.
Thank you. There's a lot to unpack there that I want to get into. You said so much that was so helpful. I want to talk specifically about I want to start with one of the things that you mentioned, which is that it's not an abstinence program. Jess, you've been open yourself about your personal struggles with substance use in the past. And I wanted to ask why you think it's important, just building off of what Sarah was talking about, that there be a harm reduction model and rather than a strict abstinence model.
Sure. Yes. So I'm a person with lived experience with substance use disorder myself, opioid use disorder. I've had issues with criminal justice system and charges myself. And shout out to Sarah George for expunging my charges so I could help be where I am today. So I really know personally the difference between like a really punitive approach and a not punitive approach. And I know what worked for me, and I have a lot of experience in this field now, and I know what I've seen work for other people. And I think that we know that people, you can't mandate people to be in recovery, and to not use substances. And, like the people that we are, working to engage in this program are people that have a root cause of substance use disorder. And it's a chronic and relapsing condition, a medical condition that they have. And, people's people are struggling so much, and the barriers are so high to getting treatment. And for us, like in terms of what we know to be effective and what feels right for our philosophy and what we know works for people, you have to work with people during periods of use. If you don't work with people during periods of use and during the periods of relapse, you're missing out on a huge chunk of time where a time when things are at a crisis level. It's more dangerous for the person, more dangerous for the community. And if people don't have people to go to and very trusted, sources of services and information and a place to go to when they're in crisis, they are so much more likely to have things, really reach a serious crisis point, and that things can be dangerous for everybody sometimes in those situations. But, we know that working with people during all phases of the recovery process, we want to help people move to, from active use to sustained recovery. But we also know that that doesn't always go perfectly, and that people are in different places, and that the best thing that you can do for the big picture is be engaged with people through all of that. It can't just be, I just remember so much when I was struggling that I didn't go to like counselors that I had or treatment services that I had that are so overly focused on just where am I at today? How am I stopping using today? And those are the people that you don't go to when you're not in that place, and when you've maybe had a new charge and you're really embarrassed about it and you don't know where to turn. Those are not going to be the people that you go to. I personally, I engaged with the harm reduction program, that the syringe exchange and the people there, because I knew that they were prioritizing me and helping me get my needs met, regardless of whether or not I had used that day or was going to use tomorrow. And those were also the people that helped me get into treatment and helped me get into the methadone clinic and helped me get care at the hospital and helped me get where I am today. Those are the people that I went to, not the people with the really strict abstinence-based approach. It's just not effective at engaging people with chronic substance use disorder. So yeah.
Sarah, I couldn't tell if you were wanting to jump in there.
No, I think I can. The thing I was going to say, I think there's another opportunity for it, so I'll wait.
Well, I want to talk about another piece, and I actually saw we're going to take Q&A at the end, but I did see this question and I was going to ask it as well, which is, let's talk about the financial piece, which I know can be also, I don't want to say controversial, but there can be questions about it. So just first of all, just practically, how much money are participants in the program earning? And then how has that amount impacted them from the clients that you've served?
You guys waiting for me to take this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I was joking with Tom and Sarah. Well, actually, people can earn up to $404, but I know that we haven't really gotten into what the model is, the contingency management model. And I know, Tom, is this a good place to do that because it just ties in so well with that?
Sure.
Tom,
I was gonna turn to Tom for that, and happy to have you explain that a little bit more right now, Tom. Thank you for that, Jess. So as Jess was just mentioning, Incentives for Success uses a contingency-based management model, and we'd love for you to explain what that means and sort of some of the considerations that come up when you are paying participants to engage in treatment. And if you could talk through some of that murkier areas that you're handling.
Sure. So contingency management is an evidence-based behavioral health modality, and it's something that's been studied for over 20 years. A lot of the seminal research was done at the University of Vermont. And so in this community, we've been kind of aware of it for a while, but it was all research studies. And so what hasn't happened over that time is that it was, implemented in the real world in the community through community-based organizations. And there's some reasons for that, partly the reluctance of people to pay people not to use drugs, for example. The desire or the tendency of some people to prefer punitive approaches because, when somebody has violated a law. A lot of people just feel that the right thing is to use a punitive approach. But contingency management is a therapeutic approach using the systematic delivery of positive reinforcement for desired behaviors. For example, in this case, in our diversion program, we're giving people cash card incentives for, first of all, participating, so showing up, and then giving them a bonus incentive, doubling the incentive for showing up, basically, if they get a negative drug test at that visit. And the incentives are escalating over time. So we give people a little bit more on the first visit as a way to get them in the door and to kind of acknowledge that it's a longer appointment with more paperwork and that kind of thing. And then the weekly visits start at $12 for for showing up, and another 12 if you get a negative drug test. And then each week it goes up, so that it's the next week it's 13 and 13, then 14 and 14. So over time, if you're getting both incentives, it can add up. And one of the things that Vera had mentioned in their RFP was that they were looking for programs that did not use fines and fees. And we were, this is an example of a program that kind of is the opposite of imposing fines and fees. It's actually giving financial resources to people that are pretty desperate. Very large percentage of our clients are unhoused. They're all have very low income. And so giving them, the incentives are powerful for them, but they also help them in practical ways. And I know Jess will be able to talk about some of the ways that they're using them. And it's been interesting to us. We're using PEX cards. The company's called PEX for the cash incentive cards. And we can see how the money is being spent, like where it's being spent. And so people are being quite responsible with it, which is interesting. And they're really valuing it. And you can add up money on the card. You don't have to spend it right away. And so we've seen people saving for Christmas presents and things like that. I wanted to mention that contingency management is the single most evidence-based treatment for stimulant use disorder. And the effect is strong enough that if it were a medication, it would be the standard of care. So in effect, we should be using contingency management as the standard of care in treating substance stimulant use disorder in particular, but it's also effective across a broad range of health issues. There's over 700 studies on contingency management and around things like smoking cessation, medication adherence, and things like that. I don't know if you want me to go into more detail about, some of the core elements, or if that's good for now.
I mean,
Or
I certainly
transition
want to
to
get,
the ethics part.
I'm sorry.
Or do you want me to transition to the ethics question?
Well, before we transition, I just wanted to ask, I guess, related to the ethics question. So Tom, I guess I want to turn to you and to State's Attorney George in terms of how do you respond to critics either politically who say, hey, why are you paying people who have committed criminal acts? And as Sarah mentioned, these are folks who have oftentimes done repeated, and by definition in this program have done repeated criminal acts. Why are you paying them for that? And how do you deal with that sort of responding to critics? But then also, Tom, in terms of the ethical issues that may raise, how do you navigate when you are paying participants to be in a program that you are running? So I can start with either one of you who wants to jump in.
I can give Tom a quick break. I can talk about the sort of critics or people who might say that, which, to be honest, I got that response far less than I expected. When the media covered this program, I only got really positive feedback from the community, and actually from community members who have been pretty harsh on me in the past. So I was pleasantly surprised that that was not the response from most people. But what I would say to it, what I had planned to say to it, had I gotten it more, was that if we think about the amount of cost, resources, and police costs and loss to businesses that we are talking about with the particular people that we are trying to address, we are, in the best case scenario, paying them $400, and we are saving thousands of dollars. We are saving thousands of dollars in police resources, prosecutor resources, court time, and just the amount of money that the community may have lost in retail establishments or other property crimes, stolen cars, whatever it might have been, that number is so high with a lot of these individuals. And for people who were picking up a retail theft every week, for example, one of those retail thefts would have been far more costly than $400. And our goal, of course, is that those people are complete and then they aren't engaging in this behavior, not just during the 12 weeks they're in this program, but beyond that, which from my perspective, that is a no-brainer for all of us, that we should want to spend that $400 to try to make them better, get them better, because when they're better, we're all better, than to try to spend that money policing and prosecuting and incarcerating them, especially when those are cases that, at least in Vermont, are still really not being prioritized by our office, so by our court. So they aren't going to have made any further progress had they stayed in the sort of assembly line that they were already in. And I also just noticed in the chat that it asked where the money's coming from. So I would just say that this was a grant that we received from Vera. So we applied as a joint effort, our office and VCJR, for a grant provided by Vera. So that money is coming from a grant.
I know that Megan is going to talk about another RFP at the end of today. I don't want to steal your thunder, Megan. So sorry, I didn't say that, but just, I know that there'll be follow-up questions, and that's a great segue to remind folks to put questions in the chat. We will get to them at the end of the discussion. I know we've covered some already, but we will get to them at the end. But Tom, let me turn back to you for the ethical question that we've been discussing.
So I have to admit that I have a knee-jerk reaction to be dismissive of the ethical question, but I recognize that there are real ethical questions. It's just that I'm so convinced of the value of this that I'm beyond them in a certain sense of the way I'm thinking. But I would just say, in terms of that we worked in the program design to make sure that the incentives were meaningful and effective. So enough dose, quote unquote, of the treatment that you're giving, but also not too much so that it would become coercive, because that's the main concern, is you don't want to be coercive, which, there is a possibility that can happen with incentives. But in the bigger picture, I would say that the evidence of the effectiveness of contingency management is so strong, and the consequences of substance use disorder are so horrible, including losing your freedom to incarceration, termination of your parental rights, your children losing their access to their parent, and overdose death. There's a lot on the line that I think it's very arguably unethical not to be paying participants to engage in treatment when we know that that's very effective. And I also think that once you start learning about contingency management, you realize that the mechanism is at work in all of our lives already. And an example is employment. Employment is a contingency management program. You give your employer the desired behavior and they give you a paycheck. And we help our clients get employment. So if we're willing to help them get a paycheck, why should we be concerned that we're also compensating them for participating in a program that's not only helping them, but is helping the community a lot?
That's such a great way to put it. I love that, Tom. Megan, I want to turn to you to talk about Vera's role, which State's Attorney George just mentioned a little bit. But can you talk also just kind of more broadly even about what kind of support Vera provided in setting up this program and your approach to it?
Absolutely, yeah. And so Sarah kind of previewed, we do the program that we do and the RFP that will be released this summer again. We ask prosecutors to apply with an amazing community-based organization like VCJR to launch or expand diversion programs in any different area. And so Sarah and VCJR applied. We give a small micro grant to each partnership that we do. So it was $75,000 with the hopes that we can build evidence that will then allow Tom to go fundraise on that on that evidence and get more money to continue the program. And so the other kind of support that we provide, Sarah's amazing. She doesn't need a ton of our support for technical assistance, but whatever she needs, we're happy to do research, program design questions, other policies that any office might be considering or thinking of, or that might stem out of the work that we're doing. We're there for support for 12 to 14 months. But I think the biggest probably advantage for the offices is we also give data support and research support around that. And so we go to the office, we have amazing quantitative researchers who pull the data from the office and are able to analyze that and tell the office what Sarah's talking about, like who we can pull who the highest utilizers of the criminal legal system are that are coming through the prosecutor's office, right? And say, hey, these top 40 people have 150 charges or whatever the case may be, or these are the top charges that you're charging in your office. Is it possible you want to think about a diversion program associated with that? And so giving a kind of a landscape analysis with data to be able to look to where our partner prosecutors could implement more reforms or tweak the current diversion program, whatever the case may be. Additionally, we have amazing qualitative researchers who come in and work with community to create metrics around what success in the program looks like. And so, around the diversion program. And so speaking not only to folks who have gone through the program, but to maybe their family members, their neighbors, other community members that have seen what this experience was and what helped the people going through the program, what they could have used more of. And so then where we create a tool for each, and we're planning to create a tool for each individual site that we work with that will allow them to kind of survey as they're going through the program and see where there are growth areas, where they're doing great things that they can do more of, et cetera, but not based on numbers, based on what the community that is utilizing this service says this is what they need and what works for them. And so it's a different way to measure success because we can't rely solely on recidivism to measure success in the criminal legal system.
Can I say one thing, Rachel, about what I see also as a really great benefit of working with Vera outside of everything that Megan just said? They have been such amazing cheerleaders for what we're doing. And like they came for a site visit to Burlington and we were so energized and everything after that because like it feels really good. It's hard work that we do every day, and so having people like the Vera team like cheering us on and letting us know that they're there for support and helping us, when you're bogged down in the day-to-day with really tough work and intense work, it's like a reminder of the bigger purpose of it and what I like it's a really good reminder of the big picture. And it's just been so nice to have their support in what's a really tough job. And so I think that's another really big benefit. Like we've absolutely loved working with them.
Well, speaking of benefits, Jess, let me stick with you for a second. And can you tell us a little bit about I like to put a human face on this. So sort of some stories of clients you've worked with and how they've benefited from this program.
Sure. One thing I think is really important, and when you were talking about, about community members or feedback from people that may not understand what we're doing or that kind of thing. One of the things that I think people question is the 12-week, that can we help people this much in 12 weeks? And so I just want to say that in addressing that part, that this specific protocol and the contingency management and the diversion part is 12 weeks, but all of the people that we're working with and that are referred into the diversion have access to us ongoing. And I think I would say over 90%, will continue working with us. And that's the way it's been so far with the people that we've had in it, that they're going to continue working with us after. And then we're there to continue helping on whatever we were working on and address bumps that come up with whatever we were working on. So it is a much longer relationship than that. And they have access to the same treatment supports and outside of the contingency management, we're still here to help people in all those ways. So it's not, so we know that there's a lot of complications that come up and things like that. So, and we're still here for all of that. And we're working with people ongoing. But which is the awesome part of why it makes sense to do this with a community organization that can still continue to work with people, and, ongoing. But we've had some really great, success stories so far. In terms of like what people use incentives for. We have one person who came into the diversion who just recently completed about a week or two ago. And Sarah had let us know there was a lot of people in the community that were really like fed up with her. She was well known, a lot of property crime stuff, a lot of retail theft, in a very touristy area. And she had gotten really well known, and the community was really over her. And so we took her into diversion, and we're working with people every week on identifying what's going on for you. What are the triggers for this? What are the reasons why you've picked up these charges, and where is your risk of getting more? And she identified that a lot of it is about resources for her. And she has a lot of PTSD and trauma and things that have happened in her life, and she grew up very poor. And she said, I know this sounds bad, but a lot of the reason why I'm stealing so many things is because I've never like had nice things in my whole life. I've never been able to feel confident in what I look like and where I go, and having things that make me feel pretty and that make me feel confident to go about my day. And someone showed her early on, this is a way that you can get your needs met, and she is embarrassed. She doesn't want to be doing that. She was horrified when I shared with her that people knew her and that she was really well known in the community, and that we were really worried she was going to end up in jail, of course. And she was really, really open to wanting to look at what got her there, and wanting to make changes. And she was getting the incentives every week. We can see what people spend stuff on, like Tom said, and we were seeing, she was so proud. She's like, I'm so good on a budget. She would be telling us all the things she got with her $30. And and there are things like shampoo and a new purse and all of these things, and cat food for her cat, and cleaning supplies for her house, and coloring supplies and craft supplies. And we came up with things that she could be doing in her free time. And so she's been cleaning her house. She's been doing all sorts of arts and crafts that she brings and decorates our whole office with. And she has not picked up any new charges. It's been probably 14 weeks now, and I don't think there were any weeks going by where she wasn't having incidents like that. And she is so proud of herself. And she said in the beginning, I really want to show people that I've been given a lot of options that don't work for me. I have not, for whatever reason, for good or bad, I am not good at, performing at a high level. I need reminders. I am always late. I missed a lot of my appointments for court things, getting warrants for missed court dates. And she needed really intensive case management support. And we've helped her apply for disability benefits long term, which she had met criteria for long ago, but some of the pieces had fallen apart, and she really needed. So we helped her do that, which will give her resources ongoing. And she thinks, and I believe too, will really help her to not be falling back into those patterns when she doesn't have things that she needs. And we also helped her connect with the medical partnership we have. And now she's getting ongoing treatment for her opioid use disorder and her stimulant use disorder. And she never misses an appointment. She was always here. She's like, I want to show that if you have services and options for people that they feel supported in and that work for them, like some of this stuff is just like, it's very strict and it's too hard for people. And if we know something isn't working for people and everybody is worse off because it's not, when you talk about a lot of people, we have to find ways to make it work for people. And that's what we're trying to do. And That's one person. We have another person who has a new baby. He actually, the contingency management was really effective for him, and he actually has no substance use at this point. He actually, I was meeting with him right before I came in here today. He has a new baby. They're working on long-term housing. He has not picked up any new charges either, and is at this point, having really strong recovery and is really happy about it. So it's pretty cool. We're really proud of it.
As you should be. Thank you so much, Jess, for sharing those. And I think it's a good sign that you have so many stories to tell that I had to cut you off.
Yeah.
So I think it speaks well of the program. State Attorney George, I want to turn to you about sort of the technical criminal court aspect of the interaction of this program and the criminal courts in terms of what happens when someone enrolls in the program and how is the court kept informed during those 12 weeks? And then also what happens if someone does not succeed, and how does that impact the case, the prosecution, if it has to go back to criminal court and now it's an open case?
So when we have decided that we're going to refer somebody and Jess has done a screening of the person and found them eligible, we file something with the court. I file something with the court with all of that person's dockets, and I tell the court that they've been referred to this program, Incentives for Success, and ask the court to change the status of the case from active to inactive. And that essentially just makes the case dormant. It doesn't get dismissed, but it also doesn't get set for a next hearing. It's just sort of stays in this limbo. And then there's no update to the court. I mean, from my perspective, once we have given this case and this person to Jess and Tom, they are their responsibility and they are in that program, and it's really not the court's business, frankly, what they're doing every week. It becomes our business if they pick up new charges. But in the meantime, the court knows that if it's inactive, it means they're in the program. And until they hear from us that they've either been successful or not, it just sits there. And then I will just say that we say, like, you can't pick up new charges, but again, it is an evidence-based and harm reduction program. So we have had a couple of people who have picked up one or two new misdemeanors. And what we've done in those cases, rather than just kicking them out of this program for that, we have had them essentially write me a letter about why they shouldn't be brought back to the system, the criminal legal system, and understanding what them kind of violating the terms of the program has meant and how it puts Jess and Tom and their program at risk, how it puts me at risk. And those have been really successful so far. People really want to be held accountable, but in a way that makes sense for them. I often think about it being like your parents being disappointed in you versus your parents grounding you. Like, they want to know that you care, and that you're not just going to immediately throw them back into the system for one or two mistakes. So in those cases, if they pick up new charges, we charge them, and then we have referred those as well. But if they pick up more than that, then I file something with the court saying this person was not successful. Please reschedule them for court. And the court, just places them sort of back on the docket along with their new charges. And then if they're successful, then I have filed something with the court saying this person was successful. All of the state moves to dismiss all of these cases with prejudice, so they can't be refiled. And we've had more of those than not, which is really exciting. The people that have not been successful, we actually just did a change of plea on one of them this morning. So once they come back onto the general docket, I do try to resolve all of their cases quickly. Because of the lag that has occurred, even though they probably wouldn't have had much happen in the meantime, just because of our backlog. So one of those was we were able to sentence this morning, and the other two, hopefully we will soon. But that's the general process of how it works. And the court has been a good partner in that they've allowed us to essentially treat this as any other court ordered or state mandated diversion program.
Yeah, that letter writing piece almost sounds like restorative justice within the diversion program.
It is, especially.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah.
Are you done, Sarah? I didn't mean to
Go ahead.
interrupt. I was just gonna say that, in terms of the letter process, that I think that this is one of the reasons that Sarah is a great partner. You know, we naturally did not want to have to discharge people unless we felt like, there was absolutely no choice. And Sarah's willingness to use this letter process has been really important. And I think what it takes advantage of is something that we've observed over time, which I want the prosecutors who are listening to hear, which is they have a certain status. Authority figures have a certain status. I've seen the same thing with corrections officers in the correctional facilities, where it is very, very meaningful to people when those people express genuine care and concern for them. And so Sarah writing them a letter and saying, I want you to succeed, but we're not going to be able to keep you in this program if you continue to pick up charges, and framing that letter in a way that they feel is a personal communication from the state's attorney, but in a caring but firm way. And then them writing a letter back explaining the circumstances for them and maybe expressing their intention to do better going forward has been really powerful. And I think Sarah has talked about that she's found the letters, interesting and, educational in a way, and helping to see what people are going through. So I just want to say that building in opportunities for second chances is really important if you want people to be successful, and that using your power and your platform as an authority figure and somebody that's seen as important in the community, can have a real impact on people just in and of itself. So just wanted to say that.
I'm so glad
Yeah,
you did.
I
Tom. Go ahead.
would just add one thing to that is something that has surprised me in working so closely with the VCJR folks is, as prosecutors, when people don't show up for court, we're very quick to sort of get mad at them or to blame them in a way that, it's like they don't care about this or they couldn't be bothered with court. And something that I've learned through these letters and through working with them and hearing these stories is that, there's people that don't come to court over and over and over again. They don't come to court. And I think, well, they're never going to be successful and incentives for success because they never show up for court. And Jess will make an appointment with them and they're early. Every single time they're early or they're on time. And we'll tell Jess, well, I didn't go to court because I haven't showered in a week and I'm dirty and I was embarrassed to be in court next to my attorney when I know that I smell. And that, like, for me as a prosecutor, it's been really eye-opening to think about, this is why diversion programs are so important, and even more so low barrier programs that can trust the people that they are working with, because he didn't mind going in to talk to Jess and Tom having not showered because he knew they wouldn't judge him, and he knew that that was going to be a safe place for him. One, I think it's just a travesty that our legal system has gotten to a place where people actually don't feel comfortable coming and because of how people might judge them even further than they're already being judged. But I think that I just say that to say that there are a lot of people who don't come to court, and it has nothing to do with their willingness to take accountability, or their inability to show up for things. It's actually a creation of our own, that we have made people not want to. And I understand that these people have committed crimes and we haven't wanted to make it easy for them. But if we actually want to address the underlying needs and make our communities safer, we need that. We do need them to feel comfortable in the space that we are asking them to be treated.
Thanks so much. Megan, for all the prosecutors, and I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, which is great. I promise we're going to get to them at the end of our discussion. Excuse me, but Megan, where should prosecutors' offices start when they're thinking about developing similar programs, or when they want other kinds of diversion programs in their communities as well? And I'm particularly interested in, obviously, we've heard a lot about how important the community partner you have is. How should they go about thinking about finding the right community-based organization to develop the program with?
Yeah, so hearing from Tom and Jess, you can obviously see there is a reason that Reshaping Prosecution believes that diversion should live in community, not within the criminal legal system. And so what I think all prosecutors should know is the first place you should look is for those service providers in your community that are doing the great work. And in small communities, that may be easier. In larger communities, it may be harder because you may not know who those community-based organizations are. But I promise you the defense bar knows, because their clients tell them when, oh, you know, this is where I go. I've gone here for treatment before. They're great, or I hate them, whatever the situation is. So the defense bar knows. I'm sure Sarah also could give us some tips on other places you could find where you can kind of investigate to find out who are those great service providers that are really trusted by people who are system impacted, because those are going to be, those service providers are going to be the people that are going to partner with you for a successful program. And so you have to look to your community for where the program can live and who can kind of like really serve to do the program. I feel like there was a second question that I'm not remembering right now, though.
Well, I asked about, you know, choosing a focal point as well as the right partner.
So one way to do that is if you do have the ability within your office to pull and analyze data, it's great to be able to look at the data within your office to say, what are the charges that we're seeing the most come through, to kind of pinpoint, you know, if it's shoplifting, then let's think about a shoplifting diversion program. Those are places where you can have great impact, not only for the community, but to your backlog, right? And to your staff, to be able to be kind of diverting those more frequent cases out and being more efficient with how your office is using their resources and time on the serious charges that you want to be investigating and prosecuting, not so much these kind of charges that you see a lot of, but that really are about people's needs not being met. And if we provided that service within the community to them, maybe we wouldn't see them come back, as we hear these stories from Jess and Tom. And I hear stories from all the diversion programs that we work with that are very similar. So I believe so strongly it's about community. I think the defense bar knows who the good service providers are. I think faith leaders probably also know who good service providers are. But also if you're in a small community, you probably know.
So, Tom, I know that a lot of pushback we might hear, questions we might have, are going to be around logistical considerations around cost. And I want to emphasize, as has been said, that these programs don't cost prosecutors' offices anything, as State's Attorney George said, and others have said, and State's Attorney George talked about how it in fact saves money. But the money does come from CBOs. So I wanted to ask you, Tom, how much roughly did it cost to launch the Incentives for Success program on your end?
So for us, we leveraged existing staff, and you know, we already had office space, that kind of thing. So those need to be figured into the overall cost if you don't have any of that in place yet. But in terms of the expenses for the contingency management, I would estimate it's been about $25,000. For the 50 participants that we're planning on, the incentives themselves would be up to 19,200 if everybody earned every incentive. But that usually doesn't happen. People will miss, you know, an incentive here or there. And what we've done in the past is we just keep track of how much we have available for incentives. And if we have extra money at the end, we add a few more participants. And then we're giving the money out on PEX cards. The company's called PEX, and that's about $1,000, which was a $400 one-time setup fee, and then $300 for 100 cards. And people lose cards regularly, so you're going to go through more cards than you have participants. And then drug testing supplies, which have run us around 3,500. Which includes things like fentanyl test strips that we're asking people, and xylazine test strips that we offer people to use to test substances if they're using them, but also the drug tests that we base the incentive on, and you know, to keep track of people's use. So it's pretty reasonable and pretty doable. And you know, I think that people would probably be shocked to know how quickly and easily this came together in terms of our conversations with Sarah, getting on the same page and getting things up and running. I think that people should see this as something that's very doable.
Fantastic. Before we turn to questions from those in the audience, I wanted to ask you, State's Attorney George, about how you view this program as combating, and you touched upon this briefly in the beginning, but how does it combat public safety concerns? And what are the gaps? Obviously, this program is intended to fill gaps in existing programs, and what are the additional gaps that still need to be filled to support those with substance use disorder in your community?
I think that what it does for public safety is it is on a daily basis minimizing the number of property crimes we have occurring in Chittenden County. I think obviously we have had only a small number so far, 11 participants, and as I said, that accounts for 150 criminal charges from our office. If half of those were successful going forward, if you know, I would have to actually sit down and like do the math, but it's hundreds of cases that aren't coming in those 12 weeks, plus hopefully long term. So, you know, with the individual that Jess was speaking of, that individual was picking up retail thefts on our our Church Street, our main sort of retail street weekly. And has not since in 14 weeks. So not only are I'm not getting those angry emails from retailers, but you know, in general, she's also doing much better. And her, you know, she's able to talk to her friends about what this program means and maybe what she's learned. And, you know, those ripple effects are really significant on public safety. They are, again, this is a small group of people. A lot of them know each other. They share resources and they share knowledge. And sometimes that hurts us all. And sometimes in cases like this, that can really benefit all of us if she's able to share what she's learned. The reality is that, as Tom said, most of the individuals that we're talking about are housing insecure. They don't have any housing at all, or are sort of couch surfing, are sleeping in parking garages, are stealing cars and sleeping in the cars. Until we address our housing crisis and allow for like long-term residential treatment, which Vermont does not have, we aren't going to solve this. You know, Tom and Jess are miracle workers, but they are not going to solve this without having a place that these individuals can live. They are constantly helping people to apply for the motel program or to apply for housing, sober living, all of these things. But the actual amount of those options is so limited right now that we are asking people to do a lot while they are struggling with substance use disorder and living in parking garages. So that is something that no prosecutor's office can solve. Tom and Jess cannot solve. That is still a huge gap that our community in our state is facing. And I know many communities around the country are expecting prosecutors to solve a housing crisis, right? And we certainly can't do that. The other just sort of more nuanced gap that if I could kind of do this all over, I would try to figure out. So maybe for people moving forward is restitution. We typically, our statutes only allow for us to do restitution orders with a conviction, which is a whole issue that, maybe I can try to address statutorily. But so folks that are going into this program, if their charges are dismissed, we can't ask for restitution. So we've had to have, people, especially if the restitution is owed to a lay witness versus, Lowe's or Home Depot or some Walmart, some massive corporation, we have just sort of let that restitution go. But for lay witnesses, we have had to have people plead to like one misdemeanor with a restitution order attached to it, and then send everything else. And I think that's a gap that I wish we could address differently moving forward. And if we are able to collect funding for this moving forward, I think that's something that we're going to want to try to figure out.
Great. I want to turn to audience questions. So before we do that, And I'm going to start with you, Jess. I wanted to ask about kind of your last takeaway point that you would give to prosecutors. We have a lot of folks watching today. What advice would you give to folks who want to do similar kinds of diversion? Sorry, Jess, you're on mute.
I was just saying I had a good note on that, and I scrambled up my notes. So it will take me too long to find. But I know this, that you know, if you don't, we cannot expect people to make changes without people having help and without addressing the root causes of their issues. So I just encourage people to prioritize what is likely to be effective over what the norm is, what the status quo is, what just feels more comfortable, that we need to be with the way that things have been going across the country. I know a lot of places are seeing increases in the things that we are, and struggling a lot, that the best way to get change with public safety, to increase public safety, to help people stop or reduce the impact that they're having on the community with criminal behaviors, is to address their needs and to help them access treatment, access housing, have support, have people to turn to. Like I was saying, if you don't have people to turn to that you actually deeply trust and believe are there for you in a really meaningful way, it is so much more likely that things will happen that are dangerous for that person and dangerous for other people. That I just really encourage prosecutors to really stretch what feels typical and normal and comfortable with the idea that if you find unique ways to help people like this, it's going to be much more likely that you'll see that it will have the impact that you're hoping it will have. So that's probably the main takeaway from this program is, you have to find ways for things to work for people. If it just continues to not work for people and you just continue to say, we gave them a chance, they had the option, like, where are we? We're still in the same exact place. So, that's my main takeaway.
Thanks so much, Jess. Tom, I'll kick it to
Yeah.
you.
So I would say to prosecutors to do this because it's really important and rewarding work and it's effective. And I would say choose your community partner carefully and look for a grassroots, mission-driven, community-based organization that has close ties to justice involved people and has earned trust with justice involved people. Because I think it makes it so much easier to be effective if the organization already has that relationship in place. And then if prosecutors were interested in doing a contingency management program, which is highly evidence-based, uh, a good resource is the UVM, which is University of Vermont Center on Rural Addiction. If you go to uvmcora.org, uvmcora.org, they have lots and lots of webinars and research papers and one-pagers and lots of stuff to help people get information about that. And then one thing that was extremely freeing to me in trying to work on the program development was I watched a YouTube video called Implementing Contingency Management, the case for customizing to your settings needs. And what that video did was it gave you the core elements that have to be in place for the program to be evidence-based and effective, and then gave you information and permission in effect from SAMHSA, the federal government, to say, yes, beyond these four things, you should improvise and customize this program to your setting and your needs, which was really important for us to have. So I think those two resources, and also reach out to us at VCJR. We'd be more than happy to help anybody that wants to try to do this work.
That's very generous. Thank you. State's Attorney George.
I would first just echo what Tom said about picking your community organization. I think historically, most people in my position in Vermont would have picked or gone to our biggest substance use provider that everybody knows, and they get a ton of money every year from the state. And the reality is they aren't the people that have the trust of the folks that we are specifically targeting. And we've heard I don't remember if it was you, Megan, that was said, like, we hear from people we're charging all the time, like that particular program or that organization comes up and they immediately say, absolutely not. I'm not engaging in services if it means going through that place, because they have put red tape up over and over and over again for that person, especially if they have missed an appointment or were 5 minutes late, or, super, super high barrier. And if you really want to engage in the people that are the most high needs, you have to lower those barriers. And not every community organization is going to be willing to do that. So that would certainly be my biggest, and also to just get out of the way once you've done it. Like, I think, again, as prosecutors, we want these programs, and then we want a lot of control in the programs. And the reality is, if you trust your community organization, you have to let them do the work, and you have to trust that they're going to do the work, because they want the program to be successful. And if you've chosen them, they also want you to be successful. They want their community to be better. So we have to stop sort of putting our own ideas or our own expectations on these organizations. One example from my perspective was the 12 weeks, as Jess sort of mentioned. That was something that even I was like, 12 weeks doesn't seem long enough. Law enforcement, that was the big thing they were frustrated by. It was like only 12 weeks and they get all of these cases dismissed. But the reality is that that's what the evidence says is the right amount of time. And so if we want to have an evidence-based organization or program, and we trust our organization, you can't then alter the evidence, right? You have to just trust that if that's what the evidence says is best, and I want an evidence-based program that works, then I'm going to get out of the way. And that was an example for me of having to get out of the way, because it did seem too short. But it's not it shouldn't be up to me. It has already been decided to be the best way to do it. So that, I think, is the hardest part for a lot of prosecutors, myself included, is to trust somebody and then get out of the way. But I think it's the most important thing for us to do.
Thank you. Megan, I wanted to give you the last word, and then we'll turn to questions.
Yeah, I mean, they all took the words out of my mouth. I agree with everything everybody said. I'll also say we are going to have another RFP in probably June or July, and we've helped expand and build a lot of these types of programs, not just contingency management, but diversion programs. We're so thrilled to work with prosecutors who want to do this amazing work, and with community-based organizations that are kind of already doing this amazing work. So I encourage people to apply for the RFP, even if you think you might not be the perfect candidate. You'd be surprised at how we can find ways to work together and be supportive of what you want to build. And so definitely people should apply, and also just reach out if you have questions or think you might, or think, I don't know if I have the community-based organization. We've certainly worked with folks to help them find those perfect people. And so reach out. We're happy to be thought partners. We're happy to help you think through what this could look like.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to try to get through these questions as quickly as possible, and I'll just kind of do anyone can answer them who wants to jump in. I think we answered the first one. Do victims of the property crimes have a say in whether the program is offered?
Yes, absolutely. So similar to any diversion program, our victim advocates reach out to the victims and ask for their input. I will say, I guess, I say that we aren't reaching out to Walmart and asking whether they have, because Walmart, frankly, and most of those large corporations don't answer us at all for when we're looking for input or restitution. So we aren't asking major corporations, but certainly lay witnesses, people, small businesses, we are reaching out to and asking. And what I would say, and what brings me back to my last comment, was most of them just want their restitution. If they are owed restitution, that is an important piece for them. So we have had to navigate how to get them that without completely taking the program off the table for them. And that's been a hard navigation, but I think we've been successful in that so far. And so far we've had a couple of people that were a little hesitant, not knowing whether or not that, the person that Jess was speaking of, one of the victims, was really hesitant, but ultimately said, what do we have to lose? Knowing especially that if she wasn't successful, we'd be in the same place we already were. And I think describing that for victims and giving them that sort of context, that the best case scenario is they're successful, right? And that's what we all want. And the worst case scenario is that we're right back where we were. And so far they've all been really great and really supportive of that.
Great. Next question is, when screening applicants for this program, do you also use a risk assessment tool, or is their admittance based solely on their charges?
Their charges, and then their charges primarily from my perspective. And then when I see charges that look like they're the people we're talking about, and specifically the person. So I reached out to law enforcement before this program started and asked them to send me like their top 10 property crime people. A lot of it overlapped with different agencies. And that gave me my sort of initial list. So when those people are coming up and they're committing these offenses, then we're reaching out to VCJR and saying, do you have a relationship with this person? They don't have to already have a relationship, but if they do you think that they'd be a good fit? And if they don't know them, then they're meeting with them and screening with them and then letting us know whether they're eligible.
Next question is, how would compensation be funded if programs continue after the grant period with Vera ends? I think Megan mentioned helping with grants if the program continues, but I'm curious how that looks in practice or whether there are other possible funding sources.
Megan, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So in our partnership, we try and support the CBOs as much as possible in whatever way we can in finding other funding to continue the work. We host what we call Thriving Thursdays, where we recently brought in some funders to give some tips on like, this is what we're looking for in programs, et cetera. I also think over the course of the time that we're there, the research that we do enables, I hope, the CBOs to be able to say, like, look, we're able to prove our success with this program. We're able to show you that people are really happy, that it's working, et cetera. And so that also helps with going to funders. There are also a lot of federal grants, et cetera, and we keep our eyes on that and share with our CBOs or also offices. Sometimes there are grants for the prosecutor's office that then the prosecutor can apply for and subgrant to the CBO, et cetera. So we have our eyes open. We're always looking and try and connect our CBO folks and prosecutors as much as we can and support in whatever way we can to get more grant funding to keep going.
The next question is a big one. Has referring to the Incentives for Success program reduced referral to the existing treatment courts? And has that resulted in any political pushback regarding the new program?
That's a great question. So far, it hasn't kept people. I mean, there are certainly some people that are in the program that may have ultimately ended up in our treatment court, but what we're trying to find is people that are sort of in that in-between phase. We've also have taken 2 people who haven't been successful in our treatment court. And part of that has been through our racial justice lens that we're recognizing that our treatment court isn't great in that regard. And so we are trying this other option when they haven't been successful in treatment court, which certainly is not the typical way treatment court cases end up. But we luckily have a treatment court judge who has been really considerate of that and again has been willing to try. But so far, I do think the 2 are conflicting a little bit more than we expected, but not in any sort of animosity way. I think all of us are just trying to figure out what's the best for these particular people. And if that means treatment court, then we're going that route. And if it means trying Incentives for Success first, then so far everybody has been willing to just try, understanding again that if they aren't successful, then treatment court is still going to be an option. And if they are successful, great. And I've worked particularly close with my treatment court prosecutor to make sure that, I'm fully aware of what has or hasn't happened with this person in treatment court and vice versa.
Thank you. The next question is, are there charges for which a candidate will be excluded from the program?
Not yet. I mean, no, the answer is no. There's nothing, the program itself it really wasn't about what charges they had. It was about their needs. So technically everything is eligible. I mean, obviously if somebody commits aggravated domestic assault and are in jail being held without bail, they aren't the type of person we're looking for. Even if they have a substance use disorder, the program was designed for people with substance use disorder who are picking up a lot of charges. So It really is much more about the particular person and the harm in the community and the type of harm in the community.
Okay, 2 more to go. We're going to finish before 3, I promise. Regarding the letters from the state encouraging success for the prosecutors who are the representatives at a treatment court, do you think a verbal encouragement is likely as effective? Do you believe that a letter has an additional effectiveness as a physical item they can look back on?
I'm interested to know what Tom and Jess think about that. I will say that I sent one of the letters to my treatment court prosecutor because he knew the individual, and I just wanted him to see it and read it. And he was very touched by it. He's brought it up multiple times since. So anecdotally, I think maybe I do think that having somebody actually have to write back, because typically the prosecutor will give the verbal whatever it is, verbal in treatment court, and it's not as necessary. Well, I don't know, Tom, do you have I think it might be, but I don't know.
I think it is too. I think that there definitely is that potential there. And I think for us, wanting the person to be successful, we wanted something that seemed serious, more serious than us just saying,
Yeah,
that we've had a conversation with Sarah George's office and this is what they're saying, and this is really serious and important, and they want you to like secondhand isn't as good. I think having it formal and having it be personalized like you've been doing, not a form letter.
Yeah.
Um, I think people find it touching, and I think people don't get letters very much anymore. A piece of paper on formal looking letterhead, and I think all of that has impact on people. I do.
Yeah.
Last
Also,
question.
sorry, I was just gonna say also on that line that with doing it in person, then you run into things like you have to schedule a time. This is a low barrier program. People might miss the time. There's a lot of things that come up with that. And also then it brings in again all of the things about maybe I'm feeling particularly not good about how I look and feel today. And now I'm not in the same place to really engage and think thoughtfully about this because I'm distracted by all of that stuff, or I'm feeling judged or whatever, So I actually think the letter it's been really impactful and a really good way to go.
Fantastic. Okay, last question. How do you measure the effectiveness of the program other than anecdotally? Megan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. These people are not getting rid of us very easily. We continue to collect data for 5 years from the launch of the program. So we're in the business here of building evidence that this works, right? And so right when it's 11 people, that's not a huge number for us to be able to strongly say like that this program works, but we will keep track of the program, continue to pull the data for the next 5 years, and eventually we'll be able to say similarly situated people who went through the traditional process. We'll be able to look at the similarly situated people who went through the traditional prosecution process versus who went through this program, where they are, what their successes have been, and then also the qualitative research that we're doing that will allow people who have gone through the program to really give feedback on their successes in or what they viewed as success in the program and how they were helped. That's another measure. It's not only about numbers.
Well, we'll end it there. Thank you so much to everyone. This was a really great discussion. I know it went long, and I want to thank Vera as well for co-sponsoring today's event. We will be sending out a link to this recording in the coming days, and we look forward to seeing you at our next monthly webinar. You can sign up at prosecution.org to get notified about all of our future events, and we will continue to be engaged on this issue. And thank you so much to all of our guests. This was a really great conversation. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.